The morning sun barely touched the gleaming towers of New Seoul Interplanetary Academy as Jin Kim walked through its front gates. The year was 2157, and the world had changed a lot. Flying cars moved silently between buildings, and holograms showed news about the latest Mars colony developments. But some things stayed the same, like how teenagers could be cruel, and how some teachers could be even crueler. Jin was 15 years old and heavier than most students his age. He knew this fact well. His school uniform, specially made to fit him, felt tight around his chest as he climbed the steps to the academy's main building. The anti-gravity lifts would have made the climb easier, but Jin always took the stairs. He had his reasons. The academy buildings looked like something from an old science fiction movie. They were tall and white, with blue force fields protecting them from the acid rain that sometimes fell. Most students came from rich families who worked in space exploration or traded with other planets. Jin's family was different. His father fixed old-style ground cars in their small shop, and his mother taught elementary school. They had spent all their savings to send him here because Jin had scored the highest marks ever seen on the academy's entrance exam. As Jin walked to his first class, he heard familiar voices behind him. "Hey, Jin, wait up." It was Ji-Soo Lee, his best friend since the first day of school. She was running toward him, her school bag bouncing against her back. Behind her came their other friend, Min-ho Kang, who was carrying what looked like half a science lab in his arms. "You won't believe what I found in the junkyard yesterday," Min-ho said excitedly, nearly dropping several pieces of old technology. Jin helped him catch a falling circuit board. It's parts from an old gravity control system, the kind they used on the first moon base. Jin's eyes lit up. This was exactly what he needed for his secret project. But before he could ask more questions, the school's AI announced over the speakers, "All students please report to your first period classes. Today's schedule includes mandatory physical fitness assessment in Earth standard gravity." Jin's heart sank. PE class, with instructor Do-Young Park. The three friends shared worried looks. "Maybe he's sick today," Ji-Soo said hopefully. But they all knew better. Instructor Park never missed a chance to run his fitness tests. He especially never missed a chance to point out Jin's struggles with them. The morning classes went by too quickly. Jin tried to focus on his quantum mechanics problems and zero-gravity engineering designs, but his mind kept going back to what was coming. He was top of his class in every subject except PE. His test scores in theoretical physics were so high that some teachers thought he was cheating until they gave him special tests to prove his knowledge. When lunchtime came, Jin barely touched his food. The cafeteria served real Korean food, not the synthetic stuff most people ate nowadays. Usually, he loved his mother's homemade kimchi and rice, but today his stomach felt too tight with worry. "You should eat something," Ji-Soo said, pushing his lunchbox closer to him. "You'll need energy for Park's test." Jin shook his head. "Last time I ate before his class, he made that joke about me looking like a space cargo container." He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Min-ho, who had been quiet while tinkering with the gravity control parts, suddenly spoke up. "You know, Jin, I've been thinking about your project. With these parts and your new design ideas, we might be able to." But they never heard what they might be able to do. The lunch period ended, and it was time for PE. The gymnasium was different from those in old schools. It had gravity controls that could make things lighter or heavier, and force field walls that could change shape to create different exercise areas. Today, though, Instructor Park had set everything to Earth normal gravity. He stood in the middle of the gym, his perfectly pressed exercise uniform, making him look like a Space Corps drill sergeant. "Line up," Park shouted as the students entered. "Today's assessment is simple. 10 laps around the track at Earth gravity. This is the minimum requirement for Space Corps cadets. If you can't handle this, you might as well quit now and go work in the ground-level shops. his eyes fixed on He-jin as he said this. Everyone knew he was talking about He-jin's father's repair shop. Some students shuffled their feet uncomfortably, but no one said anything. The track appeared as Park waved his hand, force fields creating a perfect oval running surface. "Begin," he shouted, starting the timer. Most students started running at a steady pace. They were used to this. Even though many of them had grown up in lower gravity environments, they had trained for Earth-normal conditions. He-jin began his slow jog, already feeling the extra weight pulling at his legs. By the second lap, he was falling behind. By the fourth, he was struggling to breathe. Sweat soaked through his exercise uniform, and his legs felt like they were made of heavy metal. But he kept moving. "Look at this, class." Park's voice cut through the sound of running feet. "This is what happens when you don't take care of yourself. Kim, you're barely moving. How do you expect to serve on any respectable starship? They don't make flight suits in your size." Some students snickered. Most tried to pretend they hadn't heard. Jisoo, who had already finished her laps, stood at the edge of the track, her hands curled into fists. He-jin kept running. "You're embarrassing yourself and this academy," Park continued. "Your test scores mean nothing if you can't even complete a basic fitness assessment. Space exploration isn't for people like you." He-jin's vision blurred, partly from sweat and partly from tears he refused to let fall. But he didn't stop. Each step was harder than the last, but he kept going. In his mind, he saw the designs he'd been working on late at night in the engineering lab. The new kind of spacesuit that would change everything. He just needed more time. "This is pathetic," Park announced. "Everyone else finished 5 minutes ago. Kim, you're holding up the entire class. This is exactly why." "Excuse me, Instructor Park." The new voice made everyone turn. Standing in the gym doorway was Director Song, head of the Academy's science department. Her face was carefully neutral, but her eyes were sharp. "I need He-jin Kim in the engineering lab. There's been an interesting development with one of his theoretical models that the Space Corps Research Division wants to discuss." Park's face turned red. He couldn't refuse a request involving the Space Corps. "Fine," he spat out. "Kim, you're excused. But this counts as a failed assessment." He-jin walked slowly to the locker room, his legs shaking. He could hear Park starting a lecture about the importance of physical fitness in space exploration. As he changed back into his school uniform, his hands found the small data pad in his pocket where he kept his suit designs. His fingers traced the edges of the device, feeling the slight bumps where he'd added extra memory chips. Later, in the engineering lab, Director Song looked at him with concern. "There's no Space Corps call," she admitted, "but I saw what was happening. Are you okay?" He-jin nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "Your latest project proposals are remarkable," she continued. "The theoretical work on gravity manipulation is beyond anything I've seen from a student. Even most professionals haven't thought of approaching the problems the way you do." He-jin looked up, surprised. He hadn't shown his designs to any teachers yet. Director Song smiled. "Did you think we don't monitor the lab systems? You've been logging a lot of late-night hours. The equations you're working with, they could revolutionize spacesuit design. But you need to be careful. And you need to take care of yourself." "I'm trying," He-jin said quietly. "But Instructor Park." "Park is." Director Song paused, choosing her words carefully. "Park represents an old way of thinking. He was a Space Corps officer 20 years ago, before the neural interfaces and AI assistants changed everything. He still believes physical strength is the most important quality for space travel." She walked to the lab's main computer and brought up He-jin's project files. "But you and I know better, don't we? The future of space exploration isn't about how fast someone can run in Earth gravity. It's about innovation, ideas, understanding the fundamental forces of the universe, and learning to work with them instead of against them." He-jin felt something warm in his chest, replacing the cold shame from the gymnasium. "My designs," he said, pulling out his datapad. "They're almost ready. I just need time." Director Song finished for him. "And resources." She smiled again. "Well, it just so happens that I have access to both. How would you like to have official permission to use the lab after hours? And maybe access to some better equipment than whatever your friend Minho finds in junkyards?" For the first time that day, He-jin smiled properly. "Yes, please," he said. "I think I'm close to something really important." "I think you are too," Director Song said. "And He-jin, don't let Park get to you. Success is the best revenge, and from what I've seen of your work, you're on your way to quite a lot of success." As He-jin left the lab that afternoon, he felt lighter despite the Earth normal gravity. His legs still ached from the unfinished running test, but his mind was racing with new possibilities. The parts Minho had found, combined with the lab's professional equipment, maybe he could have a working prototype sooner than he'd thought. Jisoo and Minho were waiting for him outside. "Are you okay?" Jisoo asked immediately. "We were worried when Director Song came in." "I'm fine," He-jin said. "Better than fine, actually. How would you two like to help me with an official academy engineering project?" As they walked home together, He-jin explained his plans. The other two listened with growing excitement. None of them noticed Instructor Park watching from his office window, his face dark with anger as he saw his most problematic student walking away, apparently completely unbothered by the day's humiliation. But Park didn't know what He-jin was carrying in his datapad. He didn't know about the midnight work sessions, the complex calculations, or the revolutionary ideas taking shape. He didn't know that his actions weren't breaking He-jin's spirit. They were fueling a determination that would change the future of space travel. And he certainly didn't know that his own words, "They don't make flight suits in your size," had given He-jin the final insight he needed to solve a problem that had been puzzling Space Corps engineers for decades. He-jin went to bed that night with his muscles aching but his mind clear. Tomorrow would bring another day of classes, probably more mockery from Park, and definitely more challenges. But now he had official support for his project, friends to help him, and a clear path forward. He fell asleep thinking about gravity fields and force distributions, dreaming of a future where nobody would be limited by their size or strength, a future he would help create, one equation at a time. The engineering lab at New Seoul Interplanetary Academy looked different at night. The usual bright lights were dimmed, and the only sounds came from humming machines and He-jin's quiet typing. It had been 2 weeks since Director Song had given him permission to use the lab after hours, and he had spent every evening here since then. The holographic display in front of him showed his latest design, a new kind of spacesuit that worked differently from anything before it. Traditional spacesuits were like stiff shells that protected people from space. He-jin's design was more like a second skin that could control gravity itself. "Try moving the gravity field generator to the left a little," Jisoo said, looking up from her biology textbook. She had been staying late with He-jin every night, helping him test his ideas. Her knowledge of how bodies worked was proving very useful. He-jin moved the virtual component on his screen. The computer's simulation showed better results immediately. "Good eye," he said, smiling at his friend. "The weight distribution works much better this way." Minho sat at another workbench, carefully taking apart the old gravity control unit he had found. "Hey, look at this," he called out. "These old circuits are actually pretty similar to your design. They just didn't have the power to do what you're trying to do." The three friends had turned the engineering lab into their second home. They had brought cushions for the hard lab chairs, and there was always a supply of snacks and drinks that Jisoo's mother made for them. Even the lab's AI seemed to like them, playing soft music while they worked and warning them if any teachers were coming. He-jin looked at the main screen where his suit design slowly rotated. It looked simple from the outside, just a thin, flexible suit with small devices placed at key points. But inside, it was incredibly complex. The suit would create tiny gravity fields all around the wearer's body. These fields could make different parts of the body feel lighter or heavier as needed. The real problem, He-jin explained to his friends, pointing at the design, is that everyone's body is different. Regular spacesuits come in standard sizes, but they don't work well for everyone. My suit will adjust itself to each person's body shape and weight. Jisoo nodded excitedly, and it could help people work in any gravity. Astronauts wouldn't get weak muscles on long space flights because the suit could make them feel Earth's gravity even in space. Or it could help people walk on high-gravity planets, Minho added, or make heavy things feel light during space construction work. He-jin was about to respond when the lab's AI spoke quietly. Warning: Instructor Park is approaching the science wing. The three friends quickly saved their work and dimmed the screens. They had permission to be here, but none of them wanted to deal with Park. They had learned that he sometimes patrolled the school at night, looking for students breaking rules. Through the lab's clear walls, they saw Park walk past. He stopped for a moment, looking into the lab with suspicious eyes, but in the dim light, he couldn't see much. After what felt like forever, he continued down the hallway. That was close, Minho whispered, even though Park was already gone. Too close, Jisoo agreed. He-jin, maybe we should tell Director Song about how he's always watching you. It's getting creepy. But He-jin shook his head. Let him watch. He'll see what I can do soon enough. He turned the screens back on and opened a new file. Look at this. I think I've solved the power problem. The next few hours passed quickly as they worked. He-jin's fingers flew over the keyboard as he adjusted his designs. Jisoo ran simulations showing how the suit would affect different body types. Minho kept taking apart the old gravity unit, saving any parts that might be useful. It was almost midnight when He-jin sat back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. I think it's ready for a real test. His friends looked up in surprise. Really? Jisoo asked. Are you sure? He-jin nodded. The simulations all work perfectly. The power systems check out. The safety systems are triple-checked. We just need to build it and try it. Building it won't be easy, Minho said, looking at all the parts they had collected. Some of these components don't exist yet. We'll have to make them ourselves. Then we'll make them, He-jin said firmly. The school has fabrication units. Director Song said we could use them. And he hesitated for a moment. I want to have it ready before the Space Corps recruitment fair next month. His friends understood immediately. The recruitment fair was when Space Corps officers came to look for future cadets. It was also when Park always showed off his best athletic students, making comments about who was and wasn't fit for space. We'll help, Jisoo said immediately. We can do this. Minho and I can work on building the basic frame while you program the gravity controls. And I can set up the power systems, Minho added. I've been studying the old unit's power distribution. I think I know how to make it work with your design. He-jin looked at his friends gratefully. Sometimes he still couldn't believe how lucky he was to have them. In a school where many students only cared about their own success, Jisoo and Minho had stuck by him through everything. They spent another hour planning their work schedule. They would need to use the lab every evening and weekend until the fair. It would be hard work, especially since they still had regular classes and homework. And He-jin still had to go to PE class, where Park seemed to be getting worse every day. Just yesterday, Park had made He-jin try to climb a gravity-enhanced rope in front of everyone. When He-jin couldn't do it, Park had said, well, I guess some people are meant to stay on the ground. Gravity knows who belongs in space and who doesn't. But now, looking at his completed designs, He-jin felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not just hope for himself, but for everyone who had ever been told they couldn't do something because of their body type. The next few weeks were the busiest of their lives. Every day after classes, they rushed to the lab. He-jin programmed the suit's control systems, while Jisoo and Minho built its physical parts. They worked through dinners, talked about the project during lunch, and even dreamed about it at night. Other students started noticing their project. Some made fun of them, especially when they heard Haejin was trying to build a new kind of spacesuit. "Is it because regular suits don't fit?" they would ask, laughing. Park encouraged this behavior, always making comments about realistic goals and knowing your limitations. But Director Song visited them often, checking their progress and offering advice. She helped them get better materials when they needed them and kept other teachers from asking too many questions. Sometimes she would just watch them work, smiling as if she knew something others didn't. The suit slowly came together. It looked different from regular spacesuits. Instead of bulky white material, it was sleek and dark, with small silver devices placed along its length. The gravity control units were barely visible, looking like simple decorations to anyone who didn't know better. Finally, 3 days before the recruitment fair, it was ready for its first test. Haejin stood looking at the completed suit, hardly believing they had actually done it. "Who's going to try it first?" Minho asked. "I will," Haejin said quietly. "It's my design. If anything goes wrong." "Nothing will go wrong," Jisoo interrupted. "We've checked everything 100 times. But you should try it first because you've earned it." Haejin carefully put on the suit. It fit perfectly, adjusting itself to his body just as he had designed it to do. The control panel on his wrist lit up, showing all systems were working normally. "Ready?" he asked his friends. They nodded, watching anxiously. Haejin pressed the activation button. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, suddenly, he felt lighter, not weightless, but as if gravity had loosened its hold on him. He took a step, then another. It felt like dancing. "It works," he whispered. "It really works." He started moving faster, testing the suit's abilities. He could jump higher than ever before, but with perfect control. He could run without getting tired. The suit adjusted itself constantly, supporting him exactly where he needed it. "Try the full gravity control," Minho suggested excitedly. Haejin adjusted the settings. Now he could make himself feel as light as if he were on the moon, or as heavy as if he were on Jupiter. The suit handled every change perfectly. "This is amazing," Jisoo said, taking readings on her tablet. "Your vital signs are perfect. The suit is doing exactly what it's supposed to do." They spent the next hour testing everything the suit could do. It passed every test perfectly. When Haejin finally took it off, his hands were shaking with excitement. "The recruitment fair is in 3 days," he said. "Do you think we're ready?" His friends looked at each other, then back at him. "We're ready," they said together. None of them noticed the shadow that had been watching through the lab's window or heard the angry footsteps walking away into the night. Instructor Park had seen everything, and he was already making plans of his own. The day of the Space Corps recruitment fair arrived with perfect weather. The Academy's main hall had been transformed overnight. Holographic displays showed images of starships and space stations. Men and women in Space Corps uniforms walked around, talking to excited students about their futures in space. Haejin arrived early with Jisoo and Minho. They carried their equipment in several large cases, trying not to draw attention. Director Song had given them a good spot for their demonstration, right across from where the physical fitness tests would take place. Haejin tried not to think about that too much. "Remember," Jisoo said as they set up their display, "just focus on showing what the suit can do. Nothing else matters today." Haejin nodded, but his hand shook slightly as he unpacked the gravity suit. They had spent all of yesterday running final tests. Everything worked perfectly, but he still felt nervous. This wasn't just about showing off an invention. This was about proving something to everyone who had ever doubted him. The fair officially opened at 9 o'clock. Students and their families began filling the hall. Space Corps officers moved between the displays, taking notes on their data pads. Haejin saw some of them looking curiously at his setup, but no one came over yet. Most people were gathered around the more impressive-looking displays, the giant rocket engines, the holographic star maps, and the virtual reality spacewalk simulators. At 10 o'clock, Instructor Park arrived. He wore his old Space Corps uniform, polished until it shone. A group of his best students followed him, all wearing matching exercise clothes. They began setting up their fitness demonstration area, bringing out special equipment designed to test strength and agility in different gravity conditions. "Remember, everyone," Park announced loudly, making sure his voice carried across the hall. "Physical fitness is the foundation of space exploration. Without the right body type and conditioning, all the technical knowledge in the world won't help you survive in space." Several Space Corps officers nodded in agreement. He-Jin saw some of them looking at him and then quickly looking away. His heart sank. Maybe this had been a bad idea. But then he felt a hand on his shoulder. Director Song stood behind him, smiling encouragingly. "Are you ready?" she asked quietly. "I think so," He-Jin replied. "But no one's really looking at our display yet." "They will," she said. "Just wait for the right moment." That moment came sooner than expected. Park had started his demonstration, having his students perform impressive physical feats in varying gravity conditions. He controlled the gravity field generator, making it harder or easier for his students to move. "This is what peak space fitness looks like," Park called out to the growing crowd. "These students represent the future of space exploration. They have the right builds, the right conditioning, the right mindset." "Excuse me, Instructor Park." Director Song's voice cut through his speech. She had stepped forward, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Since you're demonstrating fitness requirements for space, perhaps you'd be interested in seeing a new technology that might change how we think about physical capabilities in space." Park's face darkened, but with so many Space Corps officers watching, he couldn't refuse. "Of course," he said stiffly. "What kind of technology?" Director Song turned to He-Jin and nodded. This was it, his moment. He-Jin stepped forward, holding his gravity suit. His voice shook slightly as he began speaking, but it grew stronger with each word. "This is a new kind of space suit," he explained. "It uses controlled gravity fields to help the wearer move easily in any gravity condition. It adjusts automatically to the wearer's body type and movements." Some people in the crowd looked interested, but others seemed skeptical. Park was openly smirking. "A demonstration would be better than words," He-Jin continued. He put on the suit, trying to ignore the whispers and stares. Ji-Soo helped him check the connections while Min-Ho monitored the power levels. "And who will be demonstrating this interesting device?" Park asked, his voice dripping with doubt. "I will," He-Jin said firmly. Park laughed. "You? Perhaps you should leave the demonstrations to people who can actually move properly in normal gravity first." The crowd grew quiet. Some people looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. Even the Space Corps officers seemed unsure how to react. He-Jin took a deep breath and activated the suit. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then He-Jin took a step forward, and the crowd gasped. He moved with impossible grace, as if gravity had no hold on him. He walked to the fitness demonstration area, where Park's students quickly stepped aside. "The suit can adjust to any gravity level," He-Jin explained, his voice steady now. He pressed some controls on his wrist panel. "For example, this is how it handles high gravity." The gravity field generator was set to 3 times Earth's normal gravity. Park's students had barely been able to move under these conditions, but He-Jin walked normally, the suit glowing slightly as it compensated for the increased gravitational force. "And this is low gravity," He-Jin continued, changing the settings. Now he moved as if he were on the moon, but with perfect control. No bouncing or floating, just smooth, precise movements. The crowd had grown larger. Space Corps officers pushed forward, taking readings with their instruments. He-Jin could hear them muttering to each other in excited voices. "Impossible," Park said loudly. This must be some kind of trick. The gravity field generator must be malfunctioning. The generator is working perfectly, Director Song said. She gestured to the readings displayed on the wall. As you can see, the gravity fields are exactly as strong as you set them. He-Jin's suit is simply allowing him to adapt to them. One of the Space Corps officers stepped forward. She wore the insignia of the Research and Development Division. "Young man," she said to He-Jin, "can this suit work for anyone? Any body type?" "Yes," He-Jin replied. "It adjusts automatically to the wearer's size and shape. It can help someone who's very large or very small move comfortably in any gravity conditions." "The applications would be enormous," the officer said, thinking out loud. Space construction workers could handle heavy equipment more easily. Scientists could work on high-gravity planets. Medical patients could exercise safely in space. "But it's not traditional," Park interrupted. "Space exploration has always been about physical fitness, about having the right body type for the job. We can't just change everything because one student doesn't want to meet the proper requirements." The research division officer turned to Park with a cold look. "Instructor Park, space exploration has always been about innovation and adaptation. We don't keep doing things the old way just because it's traditional. We find better ways to do them." More officers gathered around He-Jin's display. They asked him detailed questions about how the suit worked. He answered everything clearly, showing them the technical specifications on his datapad. Ji-Soo and Min-Ho helped demonstrate different features of the suit. Park stood watching, his face getting redder and redder. Finally, he stormed forward. "This is ridiculous. I'll prove this is all fake. Let me try the suit." He-Jin hesitated. They hadn't tested the suit on anyone else yet, but he could see the challenge in Park's eyes. If he refused, Park would tell everyone the suit didn't really work. "All right," He-Jin said quietly. He took off the suit and handed it to Park. Park snatched the suit and put it on roughly, ignoring Ji-Soo's attempts to help him adjust it properly. "Now," he said with a sneer, "let's see what this miracle invention really does." He activated the suit using the wrist controls. For a moment, everything seemed fine. Then Park tried to take a step. The suit's lights flickered wildly. Warning messages flashed on the control panel. Park had ignored the safety protocols and tried to set the gravity compensation too high too quickly. "What's happening?" Park demanded as the suit's systems started beeping urgently. "What did you do to this thing?" "You need to let it calibrate first," He-Jin tried to explain. "You can't just." But it was too late. Park had already tried to shut off the suit in panic, but he pressed the wrong combinations of controls. The suit's gravity fields went haywire. What happened next seemed to happen in slow motion. Park rose a few inches off the ground, then suddenly dropped. Then he rose higher, then dropped again. The suit was cycling through different gravity settings randomly, trying to compensate for Park's panicked movements. "Shut it off," Park yelled, now floating near the ceiling. "Get me down from here." Ji-Soo rushed to her computer, trying to override the suit's controls. Min-Ho ran to the power distribution unit. He-Jin called out instructions to Park, trying to help him stabilize the suit. The crowd watched in a mixture of horror and amazement as Park bounced around the hall like a pinball, the suit's gravity field spinning out of control. Finally, after what seemed like forever, but was probably only a few minutes, they managed to shut down the suit's power. Park dropped the last few feet to the ground, landing hard on his rear end. His perfectly pressed uniform was wrinkled, and his hair stuck out in all directions. He sat there, breathing heavily, as everyone stared. The silence was broken by a laugh, then another. Soon the whole hall was filled with poorly suppressed giggles and outright laughter. Park's face turned an impossible shade of red. The research division officer stepped forward again, but she wasn't looking at Park. She was looking at He-Jin. "Young man," she said, "I think we need to have a serious discussion about the future of your invention and your future with the Space Corps Research Division." The next few days at New Seoul Interplanetary Academy were very different from any that had come before. After the excitement of the recruitment fair, everything had changed. Students who had never spoken to He-jin before now stopped him in the hallways to ask about his gravity suit. Teachers who had overlooked him in class suddenly paid attention to his ideas. Even the school's AA seemed to greet him more warmly in the mornings. But the biggest change was in the engineering lab. What had once been a quiet place where three friends worked late into the night was now full of activity. Space Corps engineers came and went, examining He-jin's designs and running tests on the suit. They brought better equipment and new materials, helping He-jin improve his invention even further. Officer Lee from the research division had become a regular visitor. She was the one who had spoken to He-jin at the fair, and she saw the huge potential in his work. "Your suit isn't just a new piece of equipment," she told him one afternoon as they reviewed the latest test results. "It's going to change how we think about space travel completely." Ji-soo and Min-ho were still there too, helping with the improvements and new tests. The Space Corps had officially hired them as junior research assistants, paying them to continue working on the project they had helped create. Their parents could hardly believe their children were earning Space Corps salaries while still in school. "The medical applications alone are amazing," Ji-soo said excitedly, showing Officer Lee her latest data. "We tested the suit on someone with muscle weakness yesterday. The gravity controls helped them walk normally for the first time in years." Min-ho nodded, looking up from his work on the power systems. "And the construction teams on Mars want to try it too. They think it could make building the new colony much easier." He-jin watched his friends with a warm feeling in his heart. They had stuck with him through everything, and now they were sharing in his success. The Space Corps had already promised all three of them places in their top research program after graduation. But not everything had changed for the better. Instructor Park had not taken his humiliation well. After the incident at the fair, he had disappeared for several days, claiming to be sick. When he finally returned to school, he was different. He didn't shout anymore or make cruel jokes. Instead, he barely spoke at all, teaching his classes in a quiet, angry voice. He especially avoided He-jin, looking away quickly whenever they passed in the hallways. But sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, Park would stare at He-jin with a strange look in his eyes. It wasn't just anger. It was something else, something that made He-jin uncomfortable. "He's planning something," Ji-soo worried one evening as they worked in the lab. "I don't trust him." She was right to be concerned. A week after the fair, Park made his move. He-jin arrived at school one morning to find a crowd gathered around the main notice board. When he got closer, he saw what everyone was looking at. It was a formal complaint filed with the Space Corps, signed by Instructor Park. The complaint claimed that He-jin had stolen the gravity suit design from old Space Corps research files. "It's impossible for a student to have created such advanced technology," the complaint read, "especially a student who can't even complete basic physical training. The design must have been copied from classified documents." The accusation hit He-jin like a physical blow. All his life, people had doubted him because of his size. Now, when he had finally proved what he could do, Park was trying to take that away too. But He-jin wasn't alone anymore. Director Song immediately called an emergency meeting with the Space Corps representatives. She brought all of He-jin's original design files, showing how his ideas had developed over time. Ji-soo and Min-ho testified about helping him create everything from scratch. Even the school's AI provided records of his late-night work sessions in the lab. Most importantly, Officer Lee and her team had already thoroughly examined He-jin's designs. "These aren't copied from anywhere," she declared firmly. "The approach is completely new. In fact, it's so innovative that our own engineers didn't think it was possible until we saw it working." The Space Corps launched a formal investigation, as they had to do with any serious complaint. But they didn't stop He-jin's project. Instead, they increased their support, assigning more engineers to help document everything carefully. They wanted to make sure no one could ever question where the invention came from. Park's plan had backfired completely. His complaint had only made He-jin's achievement more official. Now everyone knew that a student had created something the Space Corps' best engineers hadn't managed to design. The final blow to Park's reputation came 2 weeks later. Admiral Kang, the head of Space Corps training, visited the academy to see He-jin's invention for himself. After watching a demonstration of the latest version of the suit, the admiral asked to speak to Park privately. No one knew exactly what was said in that meeting, but everyone in the school heard the admiral's voice through the office door. The Space Corps needs people who can imagine new possibilities, not people who try to hold others back because they don't fit old expectations. The next day, Park submitted his resignation from the academy. He would finish the school year, he said, but would not return after that. Some students felt sorry for him, but most remembered how he had treated people over the years. The academy would find a better PE teacher, someone who understood that strength came in many forms. As for He-jin, his life got busier and better every day. The Space Corps set up a special research lab at the academy just for developing his gravity suit technology. They named him the lead designer, even though he was still a student. His team grew to include engineers, doctors, and scientists from all over the world. One morning, about a month after the fair, He-jin arrived at school to find a small package on his desk. Inside was a letter and a piece of metal that looked like part of an old spacesuit. The letter was from a retired Space Corps engineer. 40 years ago, the letter read, "I tried to design something like your gravity suit. Everyone told me it was impossible. I gave up and worked on regular spacesuits instead. I've kept this piece all these years to remind me of my dream. Now I'm sending it to you, because you proved that dreams don't have to stay dreams. Thank you for not giving up." He-jin showed the letter to Ji-soo and Minho during lunch. They sat at their usual table, but now other students joined them, eager to hear about the latest improvements to the suit. Even some of Park's former favorite students came to apologize for how they had treated He-jin before. "You know what the best part is?" Ji-soo said as they walked to their afternoon classes. "Your suit is going to help people like you. Nobody will ever have to feel like they can't go to space because of their body type. And it all started because Park was so mean to you," Minho added. "He tried to stop you from reaching space, but he actually helped you change space travel forever." He-jin smiled, touching the piece of old spacesuit in his pocket. He thought about all the people who would use his invention in the future: scientists exploring new planets, engineers building space stations, doctors helping patients recover, and students who might have been told they weren't the right shape for space. That afternoon in the lab, He-jin worked on his latest improvement to the suit. The Space Corps wanted to test it on their next Mars mission. As he adjusted the gravity controls, he remembered all the times Park had told him he didn't belong in space. "Thank you, Instructor Park," He-jin whispered to himself, smiling as he worked. "You taught me the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the people who tell you something is impossible are the ones who make you prove it's possible after all."